And welcome to the very first episode of Live, Love, Loss. And I am one of your hosts, Jason McIntosh, joined by...
Your second host. This is Katrina Madewell.
And welcome to our very first show.
This is episode 1.
Yes, it is. The retake, the remix.
That's okay. This is going to be better than the first.
What a great way to really kick off what Live, Love, Loss really means, and the irony of... Right, producer Rob behind the scenes there. The irony of, loss comes in all different ways, right? We're going to talk about all of that, but we're reshooting episode number 1 for the second time because we had some technical difficulties.
Life is not perfect.
So we're technically 8 episodes in, and we're doing a redo. So it's kind of a nice little segue to kind of spill into exactly why we're here.
Well, honestly, and if Rob hit the nail on the head. You and I have kind of got a little bit of a groove down, right? Like when you're co-hosting with someone, you got to get that banter nailed.
We went back and looked at it. It was a little stiff and rough.
Yeah.
So we're definitely more polished.
So let's tell you why we're here.
Let's
tell you the story behind Live, Love, Loss, what this show is about, how it came about, and why we're here. Like, why did we even start this podcast? I
believe destiny, and here's why. Because this is something that wasn't planned.
No.
It just is a happen chance and almost a coincidence this happened. So we will give a shout out to Mr. Don Hill. He's the Tampa Bay Real Producers franchise owner out here in Tampa Bay. And so we know him.
And for the person listening, because you and I know that it's like nothing, but they highlight top producing real estate agents in different markets.
Correct.
So we know him through that network.
He's actually interviewed you from this chair and you sitting in that chair here in this office.
He sure did. Yeah.
So you've been doing radio for how long anyway?
13 years.
Yeah, and I've actually done some radio as well here and there and some podcasts. So obviously, hence this is the studio we're in. Is my office that I work out of every single day.
Yeah. Our backgrounds are both.
We're both in real estate.
We're team leaders.
Have
some radio supplemental background.
Absolutely. So I think you had a conversation with Don about getting back into the swing of things in radio, and there's been a lot of changes. And he mentioned that you should have a conversation with me, not really knowing where that was going to go.
Well, I took a break from Tampa Home Talk because I've done that show every week since 2013. Yeah, and I've never had a break until recently. So we've always done live radio, and so much so that in 13 years, a lot has changed.
A lot.
So things are definitely more podcast centered, more video focused, and less around live radio. And so my studio was set up for live radio. We plugged into the station and did a live show with 4 segments and all the things. And so it was indeed reaching out to Don saying, hey, I want to change my studio and make it more podcast friendly, more video friendly, and kind of make all that first and make radio the second thought. Yeah. And so in my quest to find the right people to help me do that, he said, what about Jason? Remember, we cut the Real Producers episode where we featured you. That's his studio. Talk to him. He's got the radio background too. Yeah. You guys should have some great synergy in hitting it off. So that's how the whole thing started, was my quest to try to find the right people, which Rob was a big part of that, our executive producer, and helping me revamp my studio, which we're actually having a relaunch party on the 13th of June.
Yes.
I think this episode will be live by then. Yeah. And it looks great. We really redid the whole thing. And so in that quest, I called you because you were one of the people he said I should talk to. And I said, hey, Jason, here's what we're doing. Here's what I want to do. What's your ideas? What's your thought? I don't know how we got started on the topic and the conversation of loss, but you and I are both, I'm a widow, you're a widower. And I think maybe we knew that, but didn't really think about it. For me, it was recent. At that time, it was. Yeah, I don't
remember, we might have had a brief conversation then. And first off, I think that's just wild that it happened that way. And that's actually kind of the first time I'm hearing that side of the story, which is pretty cool in of itself, because I think in life, it's about timing and pathways. And I really think, I don't like the cliche, everything happens for a reason, but I think that, things happen and you make your own reasons. And then sometimes in life, it is about timing, and people may be brought into your circle for greater good and for reasons yet to be discovered yet. Right.
Well, if you're a widow, you're not talking about that every day. It's not like the forefront of every conversation you have, especially as time progresses. But you and I have done deals together in real estate.
Well, and we didn't, one, yours was very recent. We're going to get to that here in a second.
Yeah.
So then let's do that. So fast forward, we had a really good conversation on the phone, so we decided to meet for lunch.
Which, by the way, that conversation was an hour.
Yeah.
And you and I don't have an extra hour in our day, most day, every day.
Yeah.
And I remember I was driving, I was going to go, I think, preview a property, and I was sitting outside, and I'm like, I need to get in here and get out because I've got to get to other stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, this conversation has been amazing. Like, let's schedule lunch and just carry it on because I got to go, you got to go.
That's exactly where it went. You probably just called me for some ideas, and it wasn't really, we didn't know at that moment on that first call where this was going to go. We just think it's because unless you've experienced what we have experienced, it's very relatable to the two of us, and you have to experience to know, right? And I think that's what it is that common ground of someone who really truly understands what you're going through because they've been through it and lived it. So, then we fast forward to the day that we had lunch.
I think that was how we got on the topic because you asked me if I was still doing radio. I think that's how we got there. And I said, well, I'm actually on a break, and here's why. But
even then, we didn't know on that call that we were going to be sitting here in these chairs.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
That did not happen until we were at lunch, and we're sitting there talking. And I said to you,
which was like 2 freaking hours.
Yeah, and I said to you, this is actually a show right now. What we're doing
I think at the same time we
both. It was the light bulb went on.
I think it was my thought, and then you said it out loud, and I was like, yeah, this is radio content.
I think in life we have a tendency to overthink things too much, and the simplicity of the show is, let's face it, everyone on the planet is affected by loss at some point in time. It's inevitable, and death escapes nobody. None of us are immortal. So it was actually birthed right there, Plinson's and all, right there in the table, as we're eating lunch. How gross, right? As we're eating lunch, it was the light bulb moment. And there's an audience out there. There's people that will relate. There's actually people that will benefit from our conversation right now.
Yeah.
Someone who is going through it currently, or someone who's about to go through it, or they know someone that's going through it, or, it affects just about everybody in reality.
Well, think about the way that whole thing could have gone, right? I could have said, you know what? This is a great time for me to just say, I'm done. I'm not going to do Tampa Home Talk anymore. I'm not going to do anything. But instead, we added another show, which I think is pretty fascinating.
No, I think it is. And thus the birth of Live, Love, Loss, which we'll cover a lot of different things. So maybe we'll start with who we are and why we're here. And you want to go first? Ladies first?
I can go first.
Okay, you go first.
So my husband passed away in November of 2024. He had been sick for a while. And you and I had shared the conversation about how hard it is to literally watch a spouse die, which was the situation for both of us.
Yeah.
And mine was a little longer. I think I had a solid, really, my husband was diagnosed with cirrhosis 7 years before he passed, but the 2 years before were pretty rough. I knew we were not coming out of that. Yeah. And so every day, every month, every week continued to get a little worse. What I didn't know was that my husband would be unconscious on the couch, unresponsive, the day before my 50th birthday.
Yeah.
And then we called 911. He was transported to the hospital, and the next day was my 50th birthday. I spent that in the hospital next to him and our children. He was moved to hospice on my 50th birthday, and he died the day after my 50th birthday. And there was a huge part of me that knew, like that morning before my birthday.
Did you have a premonition? You're saying you felt that?
I knew he wasn't coming home that time, and the 2 months before he had been in ICU already, and was pretty rough, And granted, we're in the real estate space; we can probably answer darn near any question in that space. I know every word of the contract. I can split a mortgage inside and out. I can tell you what every provision in that means down to a word, and argue it with an attorney, but in the medical space and in that world, I'm green. I don't really know what I'm looking at.
Yes, and that's a great point. And we become a little more vulnerable because we're not in control and we're used to being in control. And death,
you have to try to trust people, and it's hard.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I had a feeling because the prior 2 months were rough. He was in ICU for a week or more, and Hurricane Milton was rolling through during that time. The power was out of my house. I was dealing with a lot as a female at that time with a couple grown kids at home. And our youngest child is 19, so I'm thankful that when when I lost my husband, I did not have young children, which wasn't your situation, and I know you'll share. And I knew that morning the fact that he just was not responsive. He couldn't respond to me or answer me. I just knew he probably wasn't coming out of that one.
And when you say that in like November, I didn't even put the two and two together. That's also what was happening.
Yeah.
At the same time, the storm's rolling through.
Yeah.
That was the second storm.
That was the second one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Second really big storms that we had here in Tampa Bay, because people that were directly affected from those storms are just now getting into their home.
Yeah.
And some of them aren't even in their home yet. So yeah, it was a lot to deal with. And we have an Airbnb. Our Airbnb didn't lose power, so that we had a lot of stuff going on there. And essentially that morning, the morning of my birthday, I remember that. I got up, and by that time, my oldest son and his wife, my 31-year-old Tyler, she was pregnant. She had delivered birth to our first grandbaby the next month in December. She was there, and they were staying in the mother-in-law suite, and their bathroom backs up to my bathroom.
Yeah.
And I remember getting up that morning. I was on my way to the hospital, and there's still a lot unsaid by the medical staff at the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember just absolutely losing it. I was crying so hard in the shower. I knew he was dying. I knew that was it. I just knew. And I just started dying in the bathroom. I just started crying, and
it became real at that moment.
And later, Ashley, my daughter-in-law, she's so sweet. She said to me later, "Yeah, I could hear you, and I didn't know what to say, and I wanted to give you your space, and you were in your private room, and I was just leaving that." And I said, "Yeah." So later that day, on my birthday, we had went to the hospital, and I remember kind of freaking out on the kidney doctor, saying, I don't know why no one is being honest with me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand why no one is just telling me the truth about what's going on here.
Yeah.
And he literally looked at me and he said, "Well, you've made my job easier today."
Oh.
That's basically what he told me. And he told me that basically my husband's kidneys and liver were shutting down. They were barely working, and that he needed to go on hospice. That's what he came in there to tell me.
Yep.
And, the months before that were rough. I mean, I had planned an impromptu vacation, like a little trip to Tennessee where we could drive. He was getting paracentesis a couple times a week, which is where you go to the hospital. They draw the fluid off your belly. And I mean, it was a standing order to go get that done. So it was bad. He had all the symptoms, all the advanced symptoms of cirrhosis. And we had a cruise planned for my birthday that weekend. Right after, I think my birthday was on a Friday. I don't even know, but we had a cruise planned with a bunch of friends, and he kept pushing to go. Well, we were going to like Haiti and some of these countries, and I'm like, there's no way it makes sense for him to get on a ship, with his advanced condition. And finally, I got the doctor, his GI doctor, to say, "Oh no, my friend, you're too sick to travel like that."
Yeah.
But he still kept pushing, saying, No, I'm fine. And I'm like, the last thing I want to do.
They don't have that type of medical help.
Well, and think about it. It's not just him and I and our children. Like, this was a bunch of friends that also planned cabins. Like, can you imagine being on a cruise for someone's 50th birthday and then their husband dies on the ship? Like, that would have just, for me, like, all these things are going through my mind. I'm like, I don't want to put anybody through that. Like, I'm already living my own nightmare. I don't want to put any of our family or friends through that.
It's a lot.
And so essentially I planned an impromptu trip, and I said, "I'll tell you what, honey," and I needed him to self-discover that I knew he wasn't healthy enough to go. But males, you guys have your own way, and even though I'm a dominant female, you and I have talked about that. There's a time and a space where they have to be the decision maker on
it's
certain
a pride
things.
thing, yeah.
And so I knew he
primal is what it is.
I knew he wouldn't be able to make that week, but I didn't tell him that. I let him understand that and realize that for himself. Yep. So we planned this trip to Tennessee. Maddie, our older daughter, she was coming back on Halloween, because remember, my birthday's November 8th. Halloween was obviously October 31st. And so he indeed had paracentesis right before he left, and he couldn't wait anymore. He had to come back to go get it drained, and he slept the whole trip up there. He didn't leave. And some friends of ours that live up there came to visit and realized they're like, they knew how sick he looked and how thin he was, and he was always a big stocky guy. So it was rough. It was a very rough start, and it was a birthday I'll never forget, to say the least. And it's so my story is I had a 31-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 19-year-old. And so for me, I kept thinking, as much as the situation sucked, how blessed I was to have older kids And then here I met you, and I hear your story, which you're going to share next. And I thought it could be so much worse. I'm in all these widow groups, not really participating, just kind of watching and reading and see people in their 30s with young children that are, they're now a widow or a widower trying to figure it out. And, not to give too much about your story, but it's a good time for you to jump in and share it.
Yeah, I suppose it is. So the year was 2008. It's 17 years ago. It was October 18th, 2008 is when my wife passed away at the age of 34. I was also 34. And my oldest daughter is now 25. At the time she was 8. And my wife passed away when my youngest daughter was 9 months old. Right. So there is a age gap between the two sisters there, obviously. And my son at the time was 13. And so we wanted to have another child, and we tried for the longest time. That's why they 8 years and, did the, what do you call that?
In vitro.
That's it. We did it a few times and didn't take, and, that gets expensive. And we almost kind of just gave up.
And when you stop trying, it happened, right? That's how it goes.
Miracle of life. That's exactly what happened. So without any turkey basters, it happened on its own, actually, with my own turkey basters. So there you go. Anyway, so the miracle of life and birth. So during her pregnancy, we knew something wasn't quite right because she would, she started to have pain in her side, didn't think anything of it, just thought it was a pregnancy. Kind of went in, and I remember, when you're pregnant, you can only do so much. It's the ultrasound, right? Can't do anything too invasive. So there was a little shadow, and maybe they knew something that they wouldn't really say, so we just knew that after she gave birth, we'd have to go back to check it out again. She would sweat during the night, and there was nights she would go through like 4 different T-shirts. It got so bad, and the pain got worse, progressively worse, and later on, there's a term called cancer sweats, basically, and that's just she when she was diagnosed, she was stage 4, lit up like a Christmas tree. So, the miracle of life and that placenta. I mean, it's keeping the baby safe,
protected,
but everything else is going crazy. So,
which as a mom, I've been pregnant with 3 children. They call it the bun in the oven for a reason, and you can naturally get hot. It was probably more extreme.
Right. So you got a good point. And so you didn't really know until later on.
Well, you're not thinking too much of it is what I'm saying.
Well, and honestly, I come to find out kind of after the fact is she knew beforehand the severity of it, but didn't maybe share. And there was really a chance that, she could have saved herself, but that's the love of mothers. She sacrificed her life for my youngest daughter's life, so that's an amazing thing. Her mother's love.
I have goosebumps listening to you say that.
So, that's the happiest time in one mother's life is the birth of a child, and to find out right after that, 30 days after, because that's when how much time they had to wait. Is you talked about kidney, and she was stage 4. She had a kidney cancer. There'd only been 100 reported cases. And she gave birth to an 8-pound baby, and 30 days later, basically had to take out a 6-pound tumor and a kidney. So, and I should probably digress and say my wife was very, 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 very Polish. So she was born in Poland, and Polish women are very, very strong, very dominating, beautiful people, smart, intelligent, and very outspoken. And that was my wife. Yeah. She looked very European, blonde, beautiful, and a big mouth, right?
My ex-sister-in-law was Polish, and that's exactly what you just described.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why I think Polish men, I say this jokingly because I was there with them, and they would agree with me, that they drink vodka for breakfast. So Polish women are a little dominating. But just my wife was an amazing person. She was the go-to friend. She was the go-to person, and, she's the one that everybody kind of looked up to. Yeah. And they would ask her for advice, and they would listen because she was very wise, so, and just a perfect mother. So, and funny as hell, and mean as hell. Did I mention that part? So, my wife was a beautiful person. And so to see this strong, because I'm an alpha male type A. I mean, it takes a lot to tame this steed here in front of you. So, she did, and very dominating. So to see someone become sick in front of your very eyes, and
it's hard to watch.
Yeah, it is, because I mean, she kicked it in its ass as long as she could, and then even when they pulled her off of everything, right? Kids had to come say goodbye to their mother for the very last time. With that in of itself is something you should never have to say to your child. I mean, so 13 years old, 8 years old, I mean, they shouldn't have to go through that. And 9-month-old, even myself as a spouse, I mean, it haunts me to this day, just the thought of having to, hey, go say goodbye to your mother for the last time, right? The last words and everything. Well, she refused to die, and so they pulled her off everything. She lived for another week and a half.
Strong.
And came home on hospice. So that's how strong she was. Now, I should also probably say that in Poland, they have their wakes in the house. So everyone comes and pays their respects at the house. And I think, like, the homes are generationally, they stay in the family for a long time. So
most European countries do that.
So she would have memories as a child, haunting memories of her and her sister, like the uncle in the house passed, that obviously, and the few doors down, and walking past that, how scary it was. So she never wanted to do that to her children. She wanted to die in the hospital. She went in on the second. And, when they make you comfortable, when they know you're in ICU, as you talked about, and something just very cold and impersonal. And if you're in the medical field, I'm not pointing fingers, maybe a suggestion is you shouldn't refer to them as a room number. I mean, they have a name, they're a person. And I always thought that just pissed me off, right? And but I was angry at the world at that time because of what I was going through. So at one point in time, they give you stuff to make you comfortable, take the pain away. And morphine's usually the bigger one, and that'll turn your brain into a toddler, like a mind of a toddler or an infant, because you're so inundated with drugs to be comfortable. And she had moments of clarity. So one of those moments of clarity is like home. She wanted to go home. And so she didn't want to die in that hospital. She made her mind up that she didn't want to do that. Yeah. So we brought her home on hospice, which lasted all of not even 24 hours. So we brought her home on she was wheeled in on the little, what do you call that thing? With the wheels, the gurney. And we had built this big, nice, beautiful house that we lived in, and we were selling our other house. And this was we're both in real estate. One of the reasons why I got in real estate is because I had bad advice from realtors. I've been retail all my life, and I had my home listed at a time where the real estate market took a bath. So I was upside down in 2 homes, and I was in control of that situation. And if I would have listened, I just didn't get good advice. No one took control. Yeah. And so I was upside down in 2 homes. My wife decided she didn't want the big fancy home. She wanted to move back into the more cozier home. So we were in the transition of doing that, not knowing that she would pass away in that very house that she'd grown to love, and not the big one. So because we lived in the big one while she was sick, and she wanted to move back into the other one. So we did. But we were doing that as she went into the hospital. So I can remember, this is back when we had landlines, not cell phones. And I remember, as she's going past where the phone was, her arm just kind of went out like this to grab the phone to put it up to her ear. So eerily that I remember this, right? It was just so like, wow, she just, like she was, pulled off everything, just so drugged out that still from all of this in her system, but to have that moment of clarity, because you couldn't really have a conversation with him at that point, right. And she just grabbed the phone, put her up to her ear just to make sure that I did what I said I would do, and then the phone was on. So we all went to sleep. My mother-in-law stayed with her downstairs because it was a 2-story. Bedroom was upstairs, and slept in the couch next to her. And I woke up at like 1 in the morning. I just sensed something, and came down, and she was gone. And so I told.
I think there's a connection with the spouse that you just feel.
I think that's what it was.
Which is how I think I knew.
Because I sleep through everything, and I'm a heavy sleeper, and I don't wake up for nothing, and just something just. I stood up, went down, she was gone, and I remember that night, the ICU nurse was there, and I can remember just the look and her eyes, like she knew, And she didn't say anything to us, but she knew. And they have what's called, you ever heard that term, the death rattle?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could just hear her
breathing.
breathing, and it was just it haunts me to this day. And she was breathing that way. And, the nurse could have said something, but she didn't. So anyway, before the kids were, before the crack of dawn, she was in and out of there because, everybody comes, the paramedics and everybody. And they came down and they're like, where's mommy? And I had to put them on the couch and say, your mother has with Jesus and the angels went home. That's a hard conversation
That's
to
probably
have.
one of the hardest conversations you've ever had to have in your whole life.
Yeah, it was the second hardest because I can remember when I was picking up my daughter from our friend's house who was watching her while she was in the hospital. I was telling her that she was coming home on hospice. I can remember my daughter was watching TV and I was kind of in the other room and she had her back turned to us and you just know she was listening to everything that we were saying. And then I said something about her coming home and she just spun around all excited, mommy's coming home, and so that right there I had to explain to her why mommy's coming home, and that's a conversation that an 8-year-old just doesn't understand, and that was hard, and that was so. I think they had a sense something was really wrong, but they just don't really grasp it to that extent. The 13-year-old probably, he was way more aware, and it affected him way differently. But at that age of 8, that's just something they shouldn't have to go through.
Yeah.
And then my Ella, she's 17 now, and the crazy thing is some of her mannerisms and some of her little personalities and little OCD little things are exactly like her mother. And it was crazy as she was growing up as a toddler, like if a sock wouldn't fit a certain way, she would whatever. And it's like, these are little mannerisms and things that my wife had. And it's just so how it's just in their DNA and
those
wiring.
Little OCD tics.
She never even met her mother, but yet her mother lives on through her. It's like I was being haunted, right? So, but it's amazing.
My oldest daughter, she's my husband in a female body.
Yeah.
It's
just wild.
She is him. It's, I was hearing you say how some of the medical staff referred them to a number. And I have to say, I feel blessed that we didn't have that experience the 2 months before when Chris was in ICU. He actually bragged about this nurse that he had named Wayne. And you know how the hospital staff is. They'll work several long days and then have several days off. So if you're in the hospital for a week, you might not even have some of the same nurses. Well, he had Wayne, and he was talking about how much he liked Wayne, and Wayne just really cared for him. He bragged about him when he came home the first time.
Yeah.
And when he passed away in the hospital, Wayne was his nurse at that time, literally from before to after he took his last breath. And he, even in that moment, when they're going on to hospice, the spouse still has to give permission and say yes, or they won't do it.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was so hard. And I remember him looking at me after he passed away, and he said, you guys are good people. You're a good family, and you made the right decision. So don't have any second thoughts about that.
Well, okay. So going back to my story with in regard to that, because my story was very quick. It was 8 months, were a few years for you. So when it happened fast, and so our oncologist, I found out later on, he had just started he went from clinical research behind the scenes to more frontline oncologist with the, cancer patient. And I remember when they diagnosed it with a name, it was called collecting duct carcinoma. And I remember being at my office and Googling it when I found out what it was. And both of my managers were in there, and a lifelong really good friend of mine was there too, one of the managers. And it said severely poor prognosis, no known effective treatment, average median survival time 7 to 9 months. And so I'm reading this and about fell out of my chair.
Your heart probably stopped reading
and
that.
So they're in there kind of how'd everything go, and I'm looking it up as they're in there. And I remember, one of the managers, Chris, at the time, he goes, "Oh, you can't just believe everything that you read, and that's just trying to downplay it a little bit." And but it was scary. That's what I read. So, we're used to being in control and having answers, and this is uncharted territory, not having control. So I remember meeting the oncologist for the first time. And, he's like, oh, you're going to be my miracle child. And, we're all of this faith. And that's okay to give him faith and everything else. But I think you got to be real about it, too. And so when we were done with the appointment, my mother-in-law was with us, too, her mother. And I told the doctor to stay back. And I'll catch up with you guys. Shut the door. Put it right in his face. And I said, listen, it's okay to give her hope. But I'm the one that has to know really what's going on. If this is too much for you to handle and I need to get help elsewhere, please let me know. But what did I read here, right? Because the conversation you had with them and what I'm reading are two different things. I'm the one that has to pick up the pieces. I have 3 children, one's a newborn. And, so it was in that moment that, I mean, this thing is pretty big, right? And she deteriorated and went downhill so fast, which is hard to watch. And I remember she had a second opinion from the day her.
So, what did that doctor tell you when you asked him about that?
He really kind of dodged the issue and didn't really.
He didn't really give you a clear answer.
No clear answer, and so I didn't tell me, hey, listen, you probably this is bad. I mean, we're going to do everything we can, but you need to make arrangements. You need to think about things, and she's on a journey to death, right? And he never said that, not once. Yeah. So I feel like I was robbed, and at that moment, and it's almost like, I don't know. I mean, I hate to say it, a very, not to down anyone in that field, but you got to be, the people on the other side of this have lives and everything else. Real. So it was very cowardice to me to not just hit me right between the eyes. So down the road, my wife went to
well, you and I talked about this, Jason, about how, like, I think the medical professional, they want to give hope, and it's their job to try and cure people, but there's a fine line between hope and being real.
Well, let me give you that fine line. So later down the road, unbeknownst to me, our neighbor across the street, which was her good friend, took her to a second opinion. I didn't know it, and told her, the doctor looked at the file, and as a very matter of fact, like I'm talking to you now, looked her right in the eyes and said, you will be dead before your daughter's first birthday. And he was true. He hit the nail on the head, and I respect him way more than the other guy.
So you said your neighbor's, your wife's friend, your neighbor took your wife to that appointment. You weren't there.
Wasn't there, didn't know what was happening.
How did you end up getting that information? How did you know what they said?
She ended up finding out later, and my wife told me. I wasn't very happy about it, but I mean, it gave us a little bit more clarity, and this was towards the end, right? So it definitely gave us more clarity of how real it really was, right? Yeah. And so again, in that situation, if I would have, things might have happened differently had we had him first, because I think there was a lot of time, because once they go on the drugs and everything else, from there, once they make them comfortable, you're choosing a choice to be comfortable or to try to. There's radiation, there's chemotherapy, and you're going through all that, which is deteriorating you, but you're trying to, we even went through the times where you went back in, it didn't get any bigger, and it shrank a little bit. So you're going through these hopes, like, yeah, wow, we're going to beat this thing. And we were never going to beat it. There was no chance. Zero chance.
I think you just have to do exactly what you did, Jason, and that's read online. Not that Google is taking the place of a medical doctor's degree, but I think you need to educate yourself enough to know what questions to ask the medical professionals, and ask them in a way that they can give you an honest answer, right? Because we live in a very litigious society, and doctors, like many other professionals, are always afraid they're going to get sued for malpractice. So so the questions that I found that always have been super helpful is, I'll say, if this is your wife, or this was your husband, or this was your daughter.
Well, that's why we're doing the show, so you guys can kind of, the good takeaways is what we could go back and do differently. I really think that doctor should have prepared us more, and I have some regrets, or I feel like there's some lost conversations or moments or things that we could have done had we known differently. And I almost think you can have faith in you're going to beat this, but it's a possibility that you're not going to beat it. So let's operate in that area where, like, let's make the most of every second that we have, and let's do some things, because in case this thing doesn't go our way, I wish we could have done more things. I wish we could have maybe taken another trip. I wish we would have had some conversations, like, make sure this, make sure that, or even record some, nice little video messages,
Yeah.
or like to hear her voice again every birthday, or just things that we couldn't have done. So if you're listening to this now, and one of the reasons for the show is an outlet, kind of like therapy for us, but take these moments, do these things. Even if you beat this thing, just do it.
Well, we talk about, live, love, loss. How we got the whole name of the show is, how do you live for today? So if tomorrow never comes, you don't have those regrets.
Yeah.
How do you love fully and deeply, especially if you're in a marriage that you've been in for a long time? They can get stale. They can get bored. I promise you'll miss that person when they're gone.
Yeah.
How do you love again after you've lost someone?
Yeah.
And then the loss, which you and I can both share. And
I think I told this story on the first episode, and it's kind of important to say it again, or at least talk about it, is when we're in that hospital right before, basically the day that they told me that they've done everything they could do, and they were also pulling liquids and fluids off of her by the pint loads, right? So, and so they pretty much had to, I was in this room, and, they assign you this nurse, that are just kind of there for you. And I can remember I'm in there, and they're telling me all these things, and, you're just naturally trying to take control of everything. Well, what about this? And, we're doing everything here. And what does that mean? And can we do this? And, they're just pretty much like, this is it. Like, this is it. There is nothing from here that we can do but keep it comfortable. And at that moment, it's like you're not used to taking no for an answer, and we can fight this. We can do this because you're in denial, not accepting the reality of it. And because no one ever really said it that way. And I remember the nurse asking me to follow her. And she took me into this little room, shut the door, and didn't turn the light on. It was dark in there, and I'm like, okay, what's happening? What's getting ready to happen in here?
Like, follow me, buddy.
Yeah, and I'm like, what's getting ready to happen here? So she just is like, she's like, stop. And she's like, just stop, right? She's like, your wife is, on the journey to death, and she was never going to come out of this thing. She was never going to she basically...
Was she honest with you in that way?
She was honest with me, but she also is just...
Like, did she say that to you? Yeah.
Yeah, she said that to me. I mean, this was later on that we met her. She wasn't there in the very beginning. But my point of the story is that she saw in me the need to just push this button. And so she basically just kind of brought it all out of me, and purposely she broke me down purposely to, like, she pushed this little button and then, like, held me and just let it out, just let go and let it out. And at that moment, I just broke down like a infant, just started bawling, right? And, this big, strong, just dominant alpha male, and she just knew what to do and how to do it. She knew it had to be done, and she sensed it. And she just held me while I cried for 15 minutes, and so it was just me coming to terms with the reality that she was gone. And I'll never forget that day. And I think that day, if we can be that nurse right here on this show for other people listening, that's what I kind of equate to what we're doing here.
Well, even I talked about the GI doctor. I think I don't know what part was recorded and what part wasn't, but I remember speaking to the GI doctor, which I felt like we're always trying to give him all this hope, and we would constantly show up because we're like, and you don't want to try to break them down or squash any hope that might exist, right?
Yeah.
But
that was a different type of, illness too.
Yeah.
Where there could have, it was different,
But I think, did I share the story about how the GI, we had the same doctors, like we would go to the doctors together all the time. We had the same GI doctor, and I had a colonoscopy scheduled not long after he passed, and I had already been putting it off, so I didn't reschedule it. Did I share this with you? I don't remember, but I'll share it.
I thought
here.
You were telling something different. No,
okay.
I didn't hear this.
So anyway, the GI doctor was giving him too much hope, in my opinion, every single, and instead of being honest with him like he should have been.
Yeah.
And I remember after he passed away, I had my colonoscopy scheduled, and they're like, well, do you want to reschedule it, Miss Madewell? I'm like, no, I just want to get it done. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. It's scheduled. I'm going to do it. And, you're going to be put under for them to do this procedure. And I went there, and I intentionally didn't say anything because I wanted to see if he knew that my husband had passed away, because it was pretty sudden. It was pretty not long after that, or I wanted to see if he was just another number,
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything intentionally. And when he saw me, he knew. He said, "I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about your loss." And I said, and I'm kind of like, I can be annoying sometimes, I think, to the doctors, but I'm gonna say stuff that other people probably won't.
Yeah.
And I remember I told him, and this was before they put me under. The anesthesiologist probably didn't want to after I said this, but I said, you know what? I said, I have to say this because I feel like it's warranted, and it's not going to help my husband, but if it can help someone else, I feel like it's going to make sense for me to say this. But you remember the last conversation you had with my husband? And this was like before the cruise, right? When I was trying to get him to tell him, look, you're not healthy enough to go. And his GI doctor did. But he said, oh, no, my friend, you're not healthy enough to take a trip like that. He said, you can't look at alcohol. You can't smell it. You can't even be in the same room with it. So that's what he finally told him. But this was like at the end. And I told him, I said, doctor, I won't say his name, your last conversation you had with my husband should have been your first.
Yeah.
And
good point.
He looked at me and, and I was thinking about this earlier when you and I were talking and some of the things you were saying. You and I and anyone in a sales type role, you learn really good language. You learn really good skill sets.
We overcome objections, and we understand. It's like we are, in essence, a detective. We are a psychologist. We deal with emotions all the time when you're dealing with the very largest purchase you ever make. So we're doing that stuff anyway.
And your language patterns can help get people through whatever is the most difficult thing
they're going through. Articulate, verbalize things. And
doctors don't have that skill set.
They don't have bedside manner.
Right. But they just don't have that skill set. I mean, it really is sort of a sales skill set, and they're just not wired that way.
No, that's very true.
So I try to look at it from a different perspective.
Very detached.
Think about the first doctor, and he probably just didn't have the skill set to tell you what you needed to hear.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, with my journey, actually, the story does continue. It didn't stop with my wife, So, let's see, 10 years later in 2018. So my son, Dennis, he passed away 10 years later when he was 23. He would have turned 30, February 2nd of this year. And that was, I can remember saying to myself, thinking, before I knew I'd lose a son too, that I would just rather get a phone call in the night, and just something just out of nowhere, because I watch
that long, slow
love, and that was super hard to do, and you shouldn't watch someone deteriorate in front of you, and it's a tragic thing, and it's a very sad thing to watch, and just all the memories that I would have with my wife, just even, watching the newborn in the middle of the night, thinking I'm sleeping and apologizing to the infant in the crib that she wouldn't be here. I mean, that kind of stuff is stuff that it's just it haunts me to this day. And so I always thought that I'd rather have it the other way around until it happened. And I got the phone call, and it was like 1, 2 in the morning. And it was basically that my son had passed, and he was visiting a girlfriend back in the hometown state of Missouri at a college graduation, and that's when I got the phone call. And they both suck equally, I can tell you, but the sudden reality that they're not here is a whole different feeling, because I might have talked about the story before. I had driven my son to the airport the last time I saw him, and I didn't know I was driving him to the airport until 4:30 in the morning. Came and nudged me, and I'm not a very good morning person, and I probably don't want to wake me up at 4:30 in the morning either. And so imagine how that conversation went. I was not very happy. So against my own will, I drove him to the airport at 4:30 in the morning to catch the flight. And you can imagine how that conversation went. I wasn't very happy, and just, don't ever do this. Don't ever call me again, or wake me up again at 4 in the morning. And just, I was cranky. And I regret to this day because of that, and I had no idea at the time. I dropped him off. Dad, I love you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry he woke you up,
Hence the premise of the show, right?
Yeah, hence the premise, because, naturally, by then maybe you think, okay, well, I've cooled down by now, and like, be safe, love you too, and I mean, it was, by that time it was 5 a.m. So I didn't, and I don't know, I didn't. That was the last time I talked to him, until I got the phone call, and I regret that.
Yeah.
Dearly, and so that sucked equally, and so.
We talked about the marriage part too, right? You were married for how long? How long were you married?
So I was married. I met my wife in 1997. She passed away in 2008. When I started dating my wife, Dennis was 1. So biologically, I'm not his father. And his dad, the last time he saw his dad when my wife was alive, he picked him up on his 2nd birthday. And I remember him saying to his mom, like, is this my daddy or is that my daddy? And the other guy didn't hear it, but I remember hearing it. And that was his 2nd birthday. I raised him as my son. I adopted him. He had my last name. He is my son, right?
Yeah,
and so
sure.
He didn't realize I wasn't his father, even if there were suspicions, until it wasn't confirmed until after my wife passed. And his grandmother told him. And so he went to go meet his father. We never talked about it. We never had to talk about it, because when he came back, and I knew that he met his father, we didn't even have to have the conversation, because he still kept calling me dad, and I still kept calling him son. Yeah. It never needed to be said, right, because you're still my son and you're still my dad. And I thought that was very cool and special. Yeah. And so I did. I did lose a son, flesh, blood, and all.
The worst of the worst, like the call in the middle of the night, a child, which is the worst, in my opinion.
No parent should outlive.
There's nothing worse than losing a spouse than losing a child.
No, there isn't. And I thought that in a million years, and I still would to this day, I would have traded places with my wife, because I think that, I don't know, something about that maternal bond and instinct that mothers have. And I think a mother, needs, I think a child needs a mother more than a father. And I think that's might be a terrible thing to say, but I only say that as a parent, as a surviving parent, because I know how much different it is. That you see most single parents are mothers for a reason, right? And there's very few single fathers out there that, when I say single father, are raising their children, right? They're raised by the mother. And in my situation, that wasn't an option. So I had to become a mother, and actually my 8-year-old daughter became a mother too, early on, which is why she's such a great mother now. I've got 3 grandchildren, and actually the youngest is named Helena, after my wife.
I love that.
So, and she became a mother at 19. Now 25, 6 years later, she's got 3, 5, 3, and just a few months old.
Yeah. So going back to the conversation we were having about Dennis, how you kind of maybe bit his head off a little bit because it was 4 a.m. and you were cranky.
Yeah.
It's this show, Live, Love, Loss, is about living for today, and loving fully, whether it's your spouse, your child, whoever it is, your significant other, because you don't know when loss is coming, but it's 100% inevitable, right? Humans have a 100% chance of mortality.
Yeah.
You just don't know when it's your time.
I should also point out and say, because people tell me this all the time when I hear it, and still, it doesn't matter how much you tell me this, I'm still going to have regrets. I still wish there was things I could have done differently. But some people, it's inevitable if they have a sickness. Yeah. It's not if, it's when. So you might have dodged that bullet then, but eventually it's going to happen. So, and so this is like full disclosure type of show. I mean, we have to get raw and real. So, some may be wondering, okay, well, how did your son pass? And it wasn't just like he got killed in a car accident. I mean, he had a darkness within him that I think at 13, the death of his mother affected him in a different way. And so I don't think he ever came back from that. And he was a very outgoing, funny, likable guy. Like, you could meet Dennis. He lit up the room, but then he had some depression too. So he was either really on or he's really off, right? It was just, he lived on both sides of that spectrum, right?
It's true for a lot of people. I think a lot of the people that are those larger than life personalities, people look at them and think, oh, they're perfect. They don't see that flip side.
So he never really came back from it, I think. And so he struggled with, addiction, the next 10 years. And I brought him down to Florida to do real estate with me. He was in the car business with me too as well. He was in the auto industry for 20 years, and he worked for me and did real well. And so he always looked up to me. He was always proud to be, my son, and to step into that world. And he was great. People loved him. So he was a good salesperson, and he was going to do real estate with me. And he took his test. He got a 71 on his first test. Didn't pass the first time, but barely did. So he was going to come back and celebrate and take the test again, and never got that chance. And he went down there and it just took one pill, and I don't even know what was in the pill. It was like a opiate or something, and just a pill, and that was a pill that was strong enough to kill him. And he was clean, for the longest, and made a bad choice, and didn't plan it to happen, and it happened. And there's a million different things I could have done differently, but like at the same time, like how much control do you really have? So maybe it wasn't then. Maybe I could have done something different. Maybe I could have done more. But this is maybe the lesson from the show is sometimes you can't. All you can do is love them unconditionally and try to give them the help that they need. And some people make their own choices, or sometimes sickness or addictions are bigger than what you can handle. But like on the flip side, sometimes people come out of it and they live a long life. This was, I think, truly accidental, and maybe he would have and could have, but I mean, there was just that one time. It only takes one time. So, and
it could have just as easily been a car accident, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Don't know. I mean, it could have been anything.
That's our stories. So we're telling our stories, and that's a great point, because everyone's version of the story is different. 5 months. It wasn't that long ago for you, and it was. It's been 17 years for me, so there's a different dynamic there. You were left with older children, and I remember in the first episode, what I did listen to, you had a period of time where you shut down and you unplugged from the world you were talking about that for months, and you just didn't want to leave. And I
was for 3 months, I took off solid. I did not go to work.
I did not have that luxury. I did not have that luxury because I had, 9-month, an 8-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So I never really got to mourn. So everybody's journey afterwards is different too. So just as different as our story was, I mean, the aftermath's different too. So I know producer Rob gave us the 50 minutes in, so I know we're probably going to put a bow on this here very shortly, but we have so much to unpack, and this is just the very beginning of unpacking. It's going to be, a beautiful journey, I think, that we're going to share here with the audience, and we're going to get to tell some more of our story and some of the aftermath. And we've already done that, actually. So, and actually, we're going to shoot episode 8 today. So,
a lot of people asked too. A lot of people have asked. I think a lot of people, and I might have shared this in the first episode, so it's probably worth mentioning really quick. But people, when someone dies, people get awkward around them. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. They're afraid to say the wrong thing. And I think that was my gift in this journey, is knowing how to be a better friend on the other side of death.
We did definitely talk about that a lot in some of the future episodes, I know. But one cliche thing that I would probably say too, and I just don't say this to someone when they have this situation, especially so fresh after. Please, maybe use ChatGPT or something to figure out what you're going to say, but do not say the following: I can't imagine. Because at the time, I'm over it now. It's been 17 years. But at the time, I know why they said it.
It's a bugaboo for you.
It's a reflex. But at the time, it's cringe, because it's like, you're just so angry at the world, pissed off. Like, how did this happen to me? But you're no better than anybody else. So why wouldn't it happen to you? Right. So death doesn't discriminate. So who are you to think better of yourself? Yeah. But it's like, I almost in that moment, like, well, you can't imagine, or you won't imagine. You won't actually take the time out of your busy day to really truly understand what the F I'm going through, right? I was angry.
They don't want to. Who would want to?
No, and I come now, it gives you perspective, and you become more empathetic. I think you become more passionate, and you really start to think about, you never really know what's happening in the other person on the other side. Like a road rage incident. You might cut somebody off, or someone might cut you off, and I could have been that person, just cut you off, and I'm in a fog because I just lost my wife, or I just lost my son, and I just cut you off because I'm just like trying to mourn here. Yeah. Give me a freaking break, right? So we just got to stop and quit getting wrapped up into what is just petty and just is like, stop, stop. I mean, show kindness, show some empathy, and just don't be so quick to emote negativity into this world, because, the words that you speak and the energy that you put out, it causes this chain of events and this microcosm of all these different little occurrences that can happen. So you just got to stop and just be more kind.
Yeah.
And think about things.
My husband was that person, people would cut us off in traffic and I would be like, you're a jerk. And he would be like, you don't know what's going on for them today. He was that person.
I still do it, human nature, instinctively, but then I have this.
Wait a minute. Pause.
I just like, okay, listen, and you have that perception now that you tragically was given to you. I think that is actually, in all of the tragedy, that's that silver lining. And I also should say too, I would tell my children all the time, like, you're here to give your mother's life purpose.
Right.
So you think about that each and every day. Be the best person and the version of yourself that you can do to honor your mother. Yeah. And your mother doesn't want this. I made a promise to my wife with my son, and that's what hurt me the most, is she wasn't worried so much about my daughters, because not that she loved them less or more, because she wasn't worried about my daughters. Why? Because she knew they were my daughters.
Right.
And it was different. Yeah, it was different with my son. She's more concerned about that. And he was my son, so I never thought about the flesh and blood of it, right? And the one thing, she did want me to remarry. She did want to make sure that whoever I end up with, that, which I never did, and she did want me to make sure that they would treat the children well. And so she was concerned about what would happen, and I felt so very proud of the man that Dennis turned out to be, and that I didn't let her down until 10 years later, a decade later. I did feel like I let her down.
Well, you don't get to choose that, and that's the thing.
So, but that, it
wasn't your choice.
No, it wasn't my choice. And I think those are things that this show and takeaways is, for other people, that there's some things we just cannot control. It's going to happen. We said it before, no one escapes it. So we're telling our story to maybe help others in what they're currently going through, or to give them hope.
I might have shared this in our first take in episode 1, but the thing that helped me a lot was listening to that Oprah interview with Sarah Goldberg, the CEO of Facebook, that lost her husband suddenly. They were on a trip in Mexico, and her husband passed away on the treadmill, and they were young, and they had young kids like you did at the time. Yeah. Helena passed, and she had to come home and tell her kids basically he was gone. But she talked about this super open culture they had at Facebook, and how when she did come back to work, people wouldn't look at her in the eyes. They would almost avoid her. They wouldn't talk to her. They wouldn't bring up his name, and I experienced a lot of that myself. And if I'm being real and vulnerable and honest, it was me before my husband passed. I was a person that would avoid that and not talk about it.
You got to let them know it's okay. And I think you got to set the tone and set the rules. And it's funny you say that. And I don't know if I brought this up in some of the other episodes, but it just made me think of it. I can remember just early on, like, you're in a fog anyway, but I can remember like having the girls out and having like the infant in the stroller and having the 8-year-old, and we'd be out there, and they would say to me, my 8-year-old at the time, she's old enough to know what's happening, and they would say, "Oh, you're giving your mother a break today," and I just, I didn't even like.
Assumption is something, isn't it?
Why even ruin that person's day? Why even? What? You just cherish life that much more, right? And so, and I think that's what this show is going to be about, is like, learning from what we've been through and helping you, and just cherishing the moments that you do have with your loved ones, and whatever type of loss that you are going to encounter. And then the life and love part of this too, because with death, there is life, and vice versa. So, like, unfortunately, life does go on. It sounds cruel. It goes on without your loved one. But so we learn to live and honor them, and to celebrate the time that we had with them. And I know I'm a better person to this day, my wife made me a parent for the first time, right? And so Rob just given us the 1 hour. We're 60 minutes in, and it was
a little wordy.
It's a quick 60 minutes, but I think we did really good on the redo here.
We're gonna have a lot of great shows. We'll have a lot of great shows and ideas and things to share with you in the future, like a lot of cool stories and just guests.
We want to hear your story, and we want to give you the ability to call in and tell your story when we get to that point. So if you're hearing us for the first time and you liked it, please like, share, tell others. We want to grow this thing so we can have an outlet to bring people on. Maybe you want to be a guest on the show and tell your story. We would love to hear that. And maybe you want to help other people that went through it. This is exciting.
I was going to say, if you know someone that's had a loss, this is the perfect show to share because we have lived it. We've done it. Leave a comment and we'll share some stuff in here that will help.
Help us grow this thing.
Well, I think we'll help people naturally, and as a result, it will grow.
Yeah. Please come back and check out episode number 2 and then on.
Yeah.
And we
talk about the 7 stages of grief, right?
Yeah,
episode 2?
Those were powerful. I had a good time doing that. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in and listening. And we will see you here very shortly.
This is Live, Love, Loss.
There you go.
I'm your host, Katrina Madewell.
And I'm Jason McIntosh. We'll see you again.
Bye for now.
Bye.